at the Sierra Fund. She is the CEO, I'm correct. And today she's going to be giving us a presentation on the restoring the ecosystem and community resilience in the Sierra Nevadas. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Izzy.
Well, thank you so much. I know that this is strange times, but I think political activists were cut out for strange times. These are opportunities for us to make really important change. So I want to talk to you about the Sierra Fund, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how this relates to creating change in America today. How do you pass legislation? How do you change our world? So essentially, I want to tell you about our organization first. The Sierra Fund was started in 2001, and really our mission is to restore ecosystem and community resiliency. Oh, it won't move. Oh, this is in the way. There we go. Can you all see the screen? Can you see my presentation?
I can see it.
Okay, because there's stuff flowing around in front of it. All right, I'm going to move it back. Okay, one of the things that distinguishes us and every member of the Sierra Nevada Alliance and all of the organizations you work with is that unlike most of the organizations that have loved the Sierra over the years, from Washington, D.C. or San Francisco or L.A., we are of the Sierra. We moved here, and I moved here 35 years ago. I raised my children here. We are of this area, and that gives us a certain amount of an understanding of how important it is that we act together in a way that is best for everyone that lives here, and that we really take into account the needs of our community. As I said, our mission is not just to restore the environment, but also to restore the communities and that we live in. And what do we need to restore them from? We need to restore them from the California gold rush. When we talk about resiliency, we talk about, like scientists do, the ability of a system to be shocked in some way and return to a stable state, whether that shock is fires, floods, or earthquakes. Where we live, that shock was the gold rush. The gold rush impacted every single bit of the Sierra Nevada. It affected our mines, our meadows, our forests, the fish that had been here for millennia, and of course, the people that had stewarded this place for thousands of years. Many people seem to think that when the gold miners showed up, this was a paradise that had no humans in it at all, untouched by humankind. And you need to know that that's not only not true, it's sort of a racist attitude. In fact, this landscape had been occupied for thousands of years by people who had done work all day, every day to maintain and build their communities and build these amazing systems we see today with meadows, fish, etc., that come jumping up our rivers. So when we arrived, we went from a territory that had a few thousand Europeans in it to hundreds of thousands of people roaring in over just a few years. The 1849 gold rush, you see here the map of the mercury mines along the Coast Range. Those were actually first discovered by the Spanish. They began to extract mercury from mines in the San Francisco Bay Area, now the San Jose area, Clear Lake, Marin County, Tamales Bay, all of those areas. When the gold was discovered up in the gold rush area that we all live in, the folks that had lived here and mined for a long time had not really realized there was gold, but the second they did, they brought that mercury over from the coast where it was recovered, retorted down into elemental mercury and brought to the gold fields for helping to use to process gold. So we had this very unusual thing. This map is actually kind of an astonishing map if you're a geologist. We had one of the largest deposits of mercury on Earth, and we, right next door to it, have one of the largest deposits of gold on Earth. Aren't we lucky? So the gold rush impacts continue to roll forward to this day. Many of the folks we know that work up where we live really, first of all, didn't seem to know that there was Indians here. And if there were any left, they kind of thought they'd all been killed. And it's just not true. There's a lot of tribes up here, a number of recognized tribes, but also that impacts from yesterday might not be still visible. But here you have right here, this is what the Yuba River looked like on September 20th, 2019. Which resulted in a water quality impairment and no swim advisory. People were very confused about what this was. We know the first minute it happened what it was. And if you see the slide on your right, you'll see what the Gold King mine spill looked like, the Animas River, that happened a few years ago, but it was very shocking. America watched with horror as this goop worked down a river. All that goop on the right and all that goop on the left is sediments from old abandoned mines. That peculiar color is not the contaminant, it's just the color of our soils. But we know that when that watercolor on the left is flowing down our rivers, it's loaded with mercury from these old gold processing days. So an artifact of yesteryear are these old gold mines that are throughout our forests. You look at it as a forest, we can see a debris control dam. You see in the picture on the left here, we're in the Tahoe Forest up in the Middle Yuba watershed. And you see that thing that looks like a sort of a strange wall, maybe a Mayan fort. No, it's an old debris control dam that was built as part of the effort to control hydraulic mining debris up in our region. So you can actually be walking through the woods, enjoying this lovely walk, and suddenly walk into a wall like this that is literally a 100-year-old dam. And as you can see by the staining of the material coming through the wall, that dam is not stable. There are roots coming through it. It could collapse. And when it does, all the crud that it's holding back, which we know is filled with mercury, will just tumble down and into the state's water system. So we've been talking to people for many years about why they need to care about the Sierra. And not just because it's a beautiful place and we love living here, but for the state of California, this is all important because we are the source of their headwater. So we are, this nice little map here made by the Sierra Nevada Conservancy shows the water sort of coming down from the Sierra and coming out in faucets in the Bay Area, in Sacramento, all the way down the Central Valley, and of course down to Los Angeles. So we've been trying to have the state of California understand that the water that they drink basically flows out of old gold mining country. And in fact, much of the water they drink was originally developed by the mining industry. What happened when gold was discovered, that up where we live, after the first 6 months or so, the visible, easy to scoop up gold was gone. So they started to look for ways to recover gold more efficiently. Hydraulic mining was one method they used. To use that method, they would build these huge dams. They would dam a creek. They would build thousands of miles of ditches, convey that water in all these different directions towards different hydraulic mines. That water was then used to power wash away mountains looking for gold. So over the course of the 50 to 60 years where this activity went on, lots and lots of creeks and rivers were dammed, lots and lots of ditches were dug. PG&E took some of these systems over to make their hydraulic mining, their hydroelectric power system. So if you look at the water that comes out of California and you look at this map in front of you, a lot of that water was developed during the mining era. And so therefore, the water system of California is in fact an artifact of the mining era where we live particularly. It was only in this last century where they built the big Oroville Dam in the 1950s, the big Shasta complex in the 1950s and 60s, that we started to have state or federal investment put into these water systems. Prior to that, it was all old gold mining artifacts, old canals wending through forests, taking water to the middle of nowhere. So when the Sierra Fund tried to understand all of the impacts of what had happened where we lived, the miners arriving, cutting down the trees to timber the mines and build the towns of the gold rush and the silver strike on the east side, of course. They conveyed all the waters down to the mines. Where there wasn't adequate gold, they would tear up meadows for farming or run cattle across it. So over the course of the 100 years of serious gold mining where we live, we had enormous impacts on our forests, our rivers, our fish, our meadows, and of course, the near genocide of the original people here. So what does one do? How do you manage this? As we increase investment, the Sierra Fund believes we should increase resiliency where we live. We want to make sure we're not just doing random acts of conservation. We want to make sure that we're making building blocks that lock together to actually address all of these seemingly disparate issues. Some of the organizations we know just work on forests. Some just work on rivers. I had a river organization tell me they don't work on fish, just rivers, which I found to be confusing. We have some folks that just don't seem to see the people in these equations. So what we've tried to do is to understand these gold rush impacts on forests, rivers, meadows, fish, and people. We bring together interdisciplinary working groups that have expertise across these issues. For example, if you're trying to figure out what to do about what happened to the fish, well, what happened to the fish is easy to explain. Every single main stem dam up from the Sacramento and San Joaquin valleys up into the Sierra was dammed. So the fish that had for thousands of millions of years traveled from the high Sierra down to the ocean and then back again, giant dams were built. Now the fish can't get back. Big surprise, the fish are dying. Well, how do you solve the problem? Well, we've brought together interdisciplinary working groups of fish biologists and mining engineers and hydroelectric dam facility experts and water quality experts to help us understand what happened and how do you fix it. We're most well known for the work we've done this way on engaging people around the impacts of specific mines, the big hydraulic mine out at Malakoff Dig and State Historic Park, for example, where we've looked at this giant problem and brought together the scientists, the foresters, the meadow experts, the river people, the fish, and of course, the First Nations people from this area to understand what happened and try to figure out what's working, what's not working, design solutions. Sometimes we have to gather new data. We do pilot projects to sort of test theories we have. This often results in some new ideas, which we then take out across the landscape. We pass legislation, we create new pilot projects, and in this way we hope to build a restored, resilient, healthy community. Oops, went the wrong way. So what does this mean? We have really three big programs. One is our ecosystem resiliency program. I've talked about that here for a minute. We are working on the mines and mine features. The hydraulic mine up in the upper left-hand corner is the hydraulic mining pit from the Malakoff Dig and State Historic Park. The lower left thing is that debris control dam I just showed you in another slide. The meadow restoration, it turns out a lot of the meadows have been degraded. Meadows are a very important way to store water higher, longer, and colder. They also are great at eating carbon. So we have a big project up in Clover Valley. We're working with the First Nations people up in that region to do understand what happened to the meadow up there. We're working on two separate, very large meadows. And then we're doing work to rebuild meadow habitat for beavers so that they will begin to dam up these creeks and slow the water down so it re-wets up these meadows. So we have a couple of big meadow restoration projects. And again, what's unusual about our meadow restoration projects, we're not just going out, restoring a meadow and leaving. We're working on long-term, 25-year relationship memorandum of understanding relationships, where we've brought the cowboys and the Indians that have been working in these meadows for a long time together with scientists, and we try to figure out how can you run cattle and have a healthy meadow and restore habitat that First Nations people can use for cultural practices, for food, for medicine. Our third big project is around forest management. We have two big projects in forest management, not looking like most people are at how to thin the forest for fuels and fire, but instead, what do you do if the forest has grown around a hydraulic mine? Or what do you do if the forest has grown around a big mining feature, mine tailings? While you're out cutting down trees for fuels management, you can take the creek there and reroute it around the mine tailings instead of through the mine tailings. And in this way, you're having a multi-benefit effect on that forest. Our fourth ecosystem resiliency program, volitional fish passage, I used as an example already. You see on the slide on the left, on the right, is a picture of Englebright Dam. Crazily, Englebright Dam was built in the 1940s and started operation in the 1940s with only one purpose: to be a hydraulic mine debris control dam, to start hydraulic mining in the Yuba River Canyon again. We didn't think that was the best idea in the world. This particular dam blocks hundreds of miles of volitional fish passage. It doesn't store water for reuse. It doesn't provide flood control. All it does is block fish passage. So we've been working with a variety of partners to understand how to support volitional fish passage on this and other rivers. The South Yuba River Citizens League have also been working on this for a long time and are strong partners of us in that effort. So those are our four ecosystem resiliency projects, each looking at how gold rush activities and features impact our meadows, our forests, and our fish. Our second big piece is, and each one of our pieces have both this ecosystem piece and the community piece. Everything I just described also has lasting environmental health problems. The mercury that was used so profligately in our neighborhood up here is now in our fish. The fish in our community are not safe to eat. Under A there, mercury in fish, you see a woman holding a fish that she's caught. We have been working to help people understand what fish are safe to eat, what fish are not safe to eat. We've been working with the state of California, and last year we're successful in getting a bill passed to require that all of the fish advisories that have been developed at great time and expertise, that actually those fish advisories are posted where people fish, so people know about them. Down in the Bay Area, all of the water bodies are posted. People come up here, they don't see posting, they think the water must be safe, the fish must be clean, and we hear that all the time. How do we know? We've talked to more than 400 people that are fishing in our watershed, and we learn that almost all of them are catching and eating the fish, and that puts their families at very serious exposure to a very serious neurotoxin. Second pathway of exposure, lots of us are living on top of old abandoned mines. We don't even know it. The middle of town here in Grass Valley, for example, there's big empty lots. Why are they empty? They used to be abandoned mine sites. The dirt there is pretty contaminated. Nobody wants to even think about trying to develop there because they have no idea how much it will cost to remediate some of those sites. The Sierra Fund is currently working with the First Nation in Nevada City, the Nisenan Foothills Rancheria. We helped them to we acquired a piece of property for them that was mine scarred, and now we're working together to understand how to reduce dusty exposures on that property. Our third issue, water quality and water access. We are in the Integrated Regional Water Management Group here and have spent many years working collaboratively with groups around these water quality issues, particularly mercury. The fourth one, climate resilience, is our newest program. We know that as things burn up, we need to figure out how to make our area more resilient. That includes improving our meadows and our forests. But it also means when it burns up here, the air turns gray. It's terrible. It's awful for our health. We're very concerned about environmental exposures to this smoke for people that are sensitive populations, elderly, they might have people with asthma, young children. Now just imagine in your mind for a minute if we have a big wildfire exposure and people are being evacuated in the middle of the COVID-19 virus exposure. Where are they going? There's a lot to think about. How about the air? I mean, the fire's not approaching at you, but the air has turned to this thick, horrible, contaminated stuff. What can we do? We don't want to tell people to leave their home because there's COVID virus everywhere. How do we become more resilient to this, and how do we help our communities manage this interim period where our forests are going to be burning up? So those are our ecosystem resiliency and our environmentally healthy programs. Those two combine together in our capacity building program. And here I'm just going to really talk about one of the main topic of today, which is advocacy for the Sierra Nevada. You can see that's me in the upper left-hand corner speaking at an event that we hold annually in Sacramento. The Sierra Fund has been extraordinarily successful at crafting and passing cutting-edge policy work. For example, we were the sponsors of the legislation along with the Sierra Nevada Alliance, the legislation that created the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. We rewrote the Surface Mining Act a couple of years ago. We last year passed a fish advisory bill. So we've spent a lot of time first doing the groundwork to really understand everything about the issue that we're trying to address. And then we come up with policy solutions and we bring them into the Capitol. We don't do this every year, although I've been a registered lobbyist on and off over the last 30 to 40 years. I try really hard not to lobby. I try very hard to get other people to do stuff, but occasionally us Sierrans have a take on an issue that nobody else even cares about, and we simply have to go down into that Capitol and tell them what our concerns are. This shows again how, this advocacy strategies. So first, scoping. We keep a constant presence in the state Capitol so we know what issues are hot, what might be moving, who are the key leaders. We have relationships with all the big lobbyists and committee staff people. One way we keep people engaged is our rural policy education program. We take policymakers and leaders out to the Sierra. A couple years ago, we had the entire legislative Black Caucus of both the Senate and the Assembly up in Tahoe with us for 3 days. For some of the members, it was the first time they'd ever seen a big lake or been out on a lake or seen a big forest that wasn't on the back of a truck. So we constantly create these relationships. A few weeks ago, we had the new director of the Department of Conservation out looking at what we do. We've had the chair of the water board, the secretary for resources, on and on and on. The current governor's father was on our board for years, so he's been out on little bits of walks with us as well. So using this, we are able to get real strategic and not just change on the edge, but significant and substantial policy change. And there's really a couple of different ways to do policy change. One is this very confusing thing here that shows how a bill becomes law in California. For those of you, I don't know how many people are listening, maybe just one or two. Not every state has a full-time state legislature. Most states have a very part-time legislature, meets every other year for 90 days. Not us. We're just like Washington, D.C. Those guys are making trouble every single year, all year long. So this shows you can come up with an idea. So Sierra Fund came up with the idea that we needed to see better fish posting. And we found a legislator that was interested in that idea, Dr. Bill Quirk. His staff person leapt all over this issue, introduced a bill. The bill came up to the first committee. It was assigned to Dr. Bill Quirk's committee, which made it pretty much guarantee going to get it out. That's the best author of the bill. If you were looking for an author, you want to find the guy or gal who's the chair of the committee with oversight capacity. Because if they don't like it, it's not going to get anywhere. If they like it, they'll help you. So how you pick your author is one of the skills of being a lobbyist, how to get it to the committee you want it to go to. When it comes out of the first policy committee, it goes through what's called the second reading, which just means it goes to the floor for a debate. There's a financial evaluation in there. It starts in the Assembly, it goes over to the Senate, has a Senate policy committee, then the Senate talks about the money. If there's any changes between the Assembly side and the Senate side, that comes back to, sometimes there's a special committee picked to figure out what to do, and sometimes the author just sits down with the committee chairs and figures out what to do. If you get through all of that shindig and you pass both houses, it goes to the governor, who either signs or vetoes. That's how it's supposed to work. It's a very vague description of how it really works. And how it really works really does depend upon the year, some of that scoping of knowing what's going to move and what's not. If you're asking for money and the state's broke, probably not going to get very far. So one way to get things done is to introduce something which brings money to your problem. Almost anything you ever propose to do to a bureaucrat, like when we said we need to put fish advisories at every water body, the first question is, who's paying for those? And so you always have to sort of identify a pot of money that you can put your action to. One of the nice things about the gold rush work that we do is there's actually a small fee for every ounce of gold that you sell in the state of California. The state gets $5. That generates a couple $1 million a year, and that can be used for some of the activities that we're describing. So lobbyists are always looking to create pots of money to pay for the things you're proposing to do. At the beginning of this year, Governor Newsom proposed a ballot initiative for the November 2020 ballot. It was a $4.75 billion initiative ballot proposal. He had 60% in there to support what he called his water resiliency portfolio. That includes regional water projects, safe drinking water, the things that are on here. The water resiliency portfolio was an exercise that Governor Newsom put together last year. He hired this enormously smart woman named Nancy Vogel and said to her, figure out all the water policy problems in California and bring me a big water resiliency portfolio that describes those and suggest some actions to take. So Nancy wrote this water resiliency portfolio, and then the governor said, great, let's put some money towards those things you've identified. The other 40% of the money was for climate resiliency issues for California communities, for these other things which maybe weren't as closely related to water resiliency, such as restoration of the Salton Sea or these extreme heat issues. They're more climate issues. So he made this wonderful proposal, and everybody eagerly leapt to the fore. The Sierra Nevada Alliance and us and the Sierra Business Council had a lobby day down in Sacramento to talk about the elements of this. At the same time, the governor, because back then we had a huge budget surplus. The state of California has been fiscally responsible. We have a lot of ways of raising money here. So the governor not only proposed a $4.75 billion bond, but he suggested money straight out of the budget. Now, why this is important is that bond money can only be spent in very specialized circumstances. It can only be spent on capital improvement projects. It can't be used to maintain things. So bonds were originally devised so that you could build a highway or a hospital or a bridge or a dam. The people would buy these bonds to finance that activity, but they were never proposed to pay for management. So you can build the dam, but you can't maintain it. You can buy the park, but you can't maintain it. So the environmental movement has turned again and again to bonds for things that we've bought or built, and now we're having trouble maintaining. So we were all so excited to see the governor put money into not bond money, but actual just spendable cashola for the sustainable groundwater management. Everybody passed this big bill. Everybody should do something about groundwater, but nobody put any money into the game. Those of us that are trying to get multi-benefit solutions, like while you're on the forest, identify the abandoned mines, clean them up, identify the old forest timber mill places, clean them up. We said we need LIDAR for the whole state. And oh my God, they put it in the budget. $4 million to reduce green tape. This is an interesting initiative about making it easier to do environmental projects. $120 million in new spending. And of course, we were totally excited. We jumped in with our own proposals as part of our lobby day and going around to talk to legislators. $1 billion for our forests and meadows, and we wanted 25% of that to go through the Sierra Conservancy for investment in our region. And that was an important message. Not everybody loves their regional conservancies, but we do. We love the Sierra Conservancy. And since we're a third of the state, if you go back and look at one of the maps I showed you a bit before, we're about a third of the state's land mass. We're about 60% of the source of developed water. We think it's fair that we should get 25% of the money for repairing where the water comes from. We were hoping to get $1 billion to restore the capacity of these aging water infrastructures that I was talking about, many of which were built during the gold rush 150 years ago. They're falling apart. And then the third one was for integrated regional water management activities. Again, not everybody loves these, especially lobbyists in the Capitol. They mostly haven't been to regional water management activities. They don't even know what this stuff is. So we were going in and holding up a standard for, yes, we love the regional conservancies. Yes, we love the regional water management. And yeah, we got to do something about our infrastructure. And everyone was having a fabulous conversation. The water bond, people thought we could maybe get, oh gosh, 8 or 9 billion. People were polling, very excited. Then two bad things happened. The first was the big budgets that were, the big bonds that were suggested for education on the March ballot, $13 billion for schools, tanked. And that was very shocking. And then everybody in the Capitol for the next week said, uh-oh, it looks like the voters aren't going to approve a big bond. We're going to have to trim it down, trim it down. And then came this. So I've been on multiple conference calls since this happened, COVID-19. Yesterday I was on a conference call with Senate leadership and the big dog lobbyists. And what we think is going to happen is that budget surplus is going to collapse. Usually we're all right now in a big frenzy because the taxes are due. And when the taxes are paid, the state of California looks in its pocket and it discovers that it now has billions and billions of dollars. and it revises the budget. And they produce something called the Budget Revise, which comes out on May 15th. Every year there's the May, well, somewhere around the middle of May, comes this big budget revise where maybe we've gotten more money in than we thought, maybe we've gotten less money, so the governor proposes a new budget, and that's when the budget games truly begin. Unfortunately, this year, or very in their great wisdom, the legislature said, we're going to extend we're not going to make people pay their taxes by April 10th. Nobody has a job. We're going to give everybody an extension until July 10th. So we have no idea how much money is going to come in. So no May revise. So the state's going to have to adopt a budget which is based on last year's budget with the proviso that it might have to be cut. Further, nobody in their right mind is going to suggest a bond right now. Bonds are affected by the stock market crash, which has happened around the COVID-19 thing. So it's a very interesting time in the Capitol. I've never experienced anything like this. The legislature has never not met. Taxes have never been waived. So you know everything I know now about that. I'm wondering, I'm gonna stop sharing and see if people have questions that they want to ask me. I know I just said a lot of stuff and maybe I went too fast, but it's hard without seeing your faces. Any questions?
Hi, Elizabeth. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, my name's Mary, and I had a question about all the money in the budget, and if there is a difference between how you can spend that in just planning or implementation, if that at all changes things.
I can tell by the nature of that question that you understand the difference between different kinds of money. So yeah, it's really important to understand this. I call it red money, blue money, green money. Bond money can only be spent, and as you were just discussing, if you get a grant to do a big bond project, let's say build a trail. The CR Fund's built a number of trails and we've built bridges. Those are reimbursable, which is like painful because they say they're giving you 600,000 bucks, but they're not really. They're paying you back 600,000 bucks quite slowly. When they give you money on a bond for a grant, you're deeply restricted in how much you can use for planning. In fact, in many cases, you already have to have your permits in hand. They call that shovel ready. So bonds often describe how shovel ready you have to be and how much percentage you can spend on planning and permitting. Budget, why we loved the budget, why we loved the money that was coming through the budget, and we always love the money coming through the budget, is most of the time you can spend it however you want, however the legislature defined it. So if there's a new slug of money, like the new safe drinking water money that came out last year from the discussion about adding fees to water fees, that you can use however that fee described itself to be. So if you're a small water district, for example, you get money from different kinds of sources. Some of it you can use for maintenance, some of it you can use for expanding, some of it you can use for planning and permitting new projects. The state budget has exactly think of it as a wallet that's got lots of different containers. Some money that comes into the budget comes from our state taxes. That's called general fund money, and that's the money we love the most because you can use it any way you want, any way that the legislature and the governor agree together that they want to spend it. Other money comes in through very specialized sorts of pockets, like the environmental license plate money. So if you get your license plate specialized in some way, some of that money gets, if you got it like a whale tail for the Coastal Conservancy plate, a bunch of that money goes into the Coastal Conservancy pocket, but a piece of it slips into the environmental license plate pocket. That's the Secretary of Resources' private little honeypot they can spend anywhere they want. Here's another source of money: fishing licenses, hunting permits, water hookup fees, mining permitting. So almost every activity that government does, there's fees that come in. Often those are collected as general fees and you can use those how you want. And that's where we often need to get money for things like planning and permitting dollars. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. And in fact, I have to say, The skill of finding the money is why after 40 years of being a lobbyist, I'm good at this. Where's the money? You remember that, oh, here's a good example. A million years ago, we passed a petroleum violation escrow account for after the Santa Barbara oil spill, which happened before, I'm sure most of you, any of you were born in perhaps before your parents were. That still, for every bit of oil that comes in the state of California, we get this dollop of money that can only go into anything that cuts the use of petroleum products. So back a million years ago, when I was the director of the what's now the Community Alliance with Family Farmers, we went after that pot of money to find money to support research into alternatives to pesticides. We got it to support the Sustainable Agriculture Research Program. And we had to explain to people that pesticides were made out of petroleum products. Took a couple of years, but once everybody got it all figured out, we could tap into that specialized pot of money that can only be used that way. So lobbyists spend a lot of time trying to stitch together pockets that can only be used the exact way they want it. That's why the Conservancy was what we Sierrans wanted. We wanted a pocket where when the money said it was coming to the Sierra, it was coming to the Sierra. And it was coming for the things we wanted. Any other questions?
Yeah, kind of following up on that. This is Rachel from the Sierra Nevada Alliance. Do you think that with all of the, relief efforts going on right now in light of COVID-19, there's any concerns with reallocating portions of the budget that we thought we could rely on?
Oh, absolutely. I think that I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how many of you watch the stock market. My sweetheart was a evil, terrible stockbroker, so he knows a lot about it. He's my recent sweetheart and new, and I love him. But anyway, he's terrified. When the reason that matters is because the stock market is an investment tool. Another investment tool are bonds. So if you want to sell a bond, you want to sell a bond into a market that's buying bonds. And right now, bonds are worth almost nothing. So you could pass the bond. Many years ago, 12 years ago, we had a disaster in the environmental movement where everybody had gotten used to passing these bonds and writing grant proposals and getting awarded a bunch of money. One day, the market dropped in 2008, the recession hit, and it turned out the state of California had approved a whole lot of grants that they did not have money in their pockets to pay for. They had not sold the bonds. They had just assumed the bonds would sell. And so imagine this. We've all written our grant proposal to the Resources Agency. We've all been told we're going to get a 3-year grant to build a trail. And we've hired the trail coordinator, and they've moved to Nevada City. And then we're told, oh, by the way, we're not reimbursing you for anything you've already spent. You better stop spending money, and also any money you've already spent, we can't reimburse you, and we don't know if we ever will. That was terrifying. A brilliant guy, John Chang, a man I really admire, came along. He was the treasurer at the time, and he said, never again will we do this. We will never again sell bonds. So give away money for grant programs that haven't already put those bonds, take them out to market and sold them. So that terrible thing I just told you will likely not happen again. If they've given us money from a bond, the bond has been sold, the money's in their pocket, they can give it to us. Whether they will be issuing any of these future opportunities that everybody was hoping for, like millions of dollars for safe forestry, millions of dollars for climate resiliency, anything that hasn't already been agreed to is very questionable in my opinion. And I'm a little worried about the Forest Service's ability to do the things they've committed to do. I don't know what this president's going to do. And now with the market gone and the budget having just been seized and shook hard for trillions of dollars from the national area, this isn't good news. It's not a good thing. I want to say I've been through these things for a long time, and I could burst into a rendition, and I have sometimes in my life. The sun will come out tomorrow. This is an opportunity for us as environmentalists to think about what is our model? How do we be resilient? You guys are all young. I know everybody listening to this is much, much younger than me, but they compare this time to 1975. That's the year I graduated from high school. That was the last time it was this bad. So it seems like it's always been this bad to me. But thinking about money carefully and thoughtfully and understanding how it works makes you a much more effective policy advocate. Because you're not doing magical thinking. You're coming into the legislature saying, I know that things are bad. I've got an idea of how we can fix this. And I think right now that's going to be doing us figuring out ahead of time how COVID-19 affects because we're going to have to talk to them about that. The state parks may not open at all. Where's their money going to come from? That's their revenue. See what I'm saying? I don't want to scare you, but I want you to know that when there's a crisis like that, there's real opportunities to change things. Everybody's shook up. We can change things. Other questions? Rachel, you should put your face back on because, I know you're not, I'm just teasing. The rest of you, I can't see. Would you like any tips on how you actually lobby? I know we will be lobbying again. It is unbelievable that we can't walk into the state capitol and talk to people right now. Again, first time in California history. How can we be effective?
I just have to make one request, as there are a lot of AmeriCorps members on here who aren't allowed to be doing any lobbying stuff. If you do want to talk about that, SNAP members, just stop listening for a few minutes.
Right. I think that the SNAP, because we've had SNAP, I understand and I appreciate it, and I thank you for raising that. I'm not talking about any specific piece of legislation.
Okay, just general tips.
Yeah, lobbying is a very specific thing. Lobbying is when you go in and you say, I want to tell you that you should vote yes on AB 22. AmeriCorps, it's very smart to not go into the Capitol and talk about anything with your pin on. But you're absolutely, if a senator were to ask an AmeriCorps service member partner, let's say I had them on a tour, and as one of our AmeriCorps were there, and they said, oh, are you concerned about fish consumption? They could absolutely say they were. They just can't say, so vote yes on AB 22. You can educate people. You just can't advocate a specific legislative position. This is a very important piece to understand. A few years ago, the Sierra Fund, based on its very clear understanding of the science around a technique of mining called suction dredge mining, wherein you take a vacuum and you stick it in the water and you suck up everything and you look for gold. We did a lot of work to understand how terribly, terribly environmentally destructive that was. We participated in public advisory committee meetings, and we did research, and we talked to research scientists. And after a lot of heartbreaking work, we did what I call a budget play. We went into the legislature and said, look, this activity caused a huge environmental impact, huge. And the permit for this suction dredge machine is $48. We want to know how much money the state's collecting from these suction dredge miners as part of your regulatory scheme. And the state said, we're collecting $400,000. And we said, how much are you spending overseeing this regulatory scheme? And they said $1.3 million. So we, the people, are getting $400,000 in for an activity that costs us $1.3 million. So we said, we think you should, the court then ordered an environmental impact report where we showed that there was 9 significant and unmitigable impacts of this activity that we, the people, were subsidizing to the tune of nearly $1 million. So we went into the legislature and talked them into a new permitting scheme for water, for permitting suction dredges, and effectively put a moratorium on suction dredge mining. That happened in 2008, and those guys it's not been legal to mine using that technique for 12 years. Well, suction dredge miners were just furious. I have to say and I understandably so, very, very mad. And so they claimed, when that bill was passed, which was the year 2015, Senate Bill 637 by Senator Ben Allen, it was passed and signed into law. The suction dredge miners claim that I must have disobeyed lobbying laws. I must have lobbied to have been able to get that bill passed. And they turned in a complaint against me to the Fair Political Practices Commission, which is not your best favorite thing to have happen to you. We're a nonprofit tax exempt organization. We're a designated 501c3, which means we can do a very limited amount of lobbying. So because I'm old and cagey, I had kept very careful track of my time, my hours, my travel, every time I went to the Capitol. And when the Fair Political Practices Committee contacted me, I was able to immediately produce all of the work I had done. And I did not meet the criteria for lobbying, which is not the AmeriCorps criteria. The AmeriCorps criteria is strict, no advocacy of any kind on legislative or policy initiatives, ballot initiatives, even at the county level, they shouldn't be going in and advocating on any kind of regulation. So that's AmeriCorps rules. But lobbying rules are, an organization like mine can spend up to $15,000 a quarter, or no more than $15,000 a quarter, no more than a certain percentage of your time, no more than a certain percentage of your budget in direct advocacy. Direct advocacy is when you walk into the state capitol and you say, I want you to vote yes on AB 32. You put on your suit, you pick up your briefcase, and you walk around in the building lobbying people. That's strictly limited by both the IRS and the state of California. And it's strictly limited, but it's limited to a pretty high amount. You can spend, depending upon the size of your budget, you can spend 10%, even 20% of your budget on direct lobbying. What if, however, instead of that, you want to convince everybody to vote yes on AB 32, and you want everybody in Senator Joe Smith's district to call Senator Joe and tell him to vote yes on AB 32. So you put bulletin boards and you put ads in the newspapers saying, call your legislator, vote him, tell him to vote yes on AB 32. That's called grassroots advocacy. And that's almost entirely forbidden for a 501c3. You can spend up maybe 3% of your total budget. So with the Sierra Fund's got $1 million budget, we can spend $30,000 a year on direct advocacy. We don't really do any direct advocacy, but we do we do almost no grassroots advocacy. We do direct advocacy where I walk into the Capitol and tell people what I want to have done. So there's different kinds of lobbying, there's different kinds of advocacy, and there's these restrictions also exist in the funding world. Some foundations don't want to see the word policy in a proposal to them. They are allergic to policy of any kind because of the way their endowment was structured. They are to do no political work at all. Some foundations will let you do lobbying. Some foundations will let you use some of their money to sue people. That's another big issue, money for litigation. Highly restricted. You obviously couldn't use federal or state money for that. You can't use most foundation money for that. So one of the things to understand when you're advocating is, are you lobbying? Are you educating? Are you advocating? I'm mostly advocating. Very rarely am I actually technically lobbying. Thank you. Was that Madonna that said that about be careful about lobbying and being a Sierra Corps?
That was Rachel.
She's
the program director of SNAP.
Yeah, and thank you. That was an excellent explanation and clarification. Thanks so much.
In fact, we didn't even let our AmeriCorps service member partners take their pins off and walk into the Capitol, even if we weren't doing technical lobbying. We just didn't. The last thing in the world any of us want to do is get Sierra Nevada Alliance killed for, some tiny little infraction of a rule. The rest of us can pick up that piece and do that work. And that's the advantage of the Alliance. That's an advantage of collaborative work. If you look at the rich distribution of organizations on this call and also in the Alliance's membership, some of those organizations are set up just to do land acquisition, and that's perfect for a bond. Some of them are set up for litigation. That's something where you want to be really careful because litigation can be very expensive and people can sue you for doing that. Some of them are set up to educate their community about everything watershed-wise, like Circle, the South Yuba River Citizens League. And they do the entire enchilada. They do education, they do clean the garbage out of the river. They do policy work. They don't do a lot of direct lobbying at all, but they cover the whole map. So different kinds of organizations, and just like I was talking about other things, Circle has to get different kinds of money. The Alliance has to get different kinds of money to do different sorts of things. It's exactly like the state of California or the federal government or a county. In fact, most of the money that the state of California allocates and spends, most of the money that's allocated by counties, is not the kind of money we're talking about. They get very restricted money. Counties get federal dollars for very specific activities like Social Security and food stamps and jailing people. They don't give you money for arresting people. That has to come out of the county general fund. Isn't that funny? You can't arrest them, but you can put them in jail. So the money, understanding the very tricky parts of where your money comes from, as a leader in the environmental movement, this will be something you'll want to always be keeping track of, because research money is hard to get. You don't want to spend research money doing outreach. Outreach money is hard to get. You don't want to spend outreach money doing research. You got to spend the money. You got to understand what you need. So sophisticated organizations will have various different ways that they raise their funding so that they can do the different activities it requires for their mission. Lobbying being one of those very restricted activities that you have to raise special, bright red, very, very well tracked money. If you're doing any lobbying in an environmental group, you want to keep track of every dollar and be prepared to show receipts, calendars, mileage sheets, everything.
I wanted to see if there was anyone else that had any questions as well.
I see a chat. Somebody's got a chat. Daisy Shadlish says, yes.
That was in response to if we could hear you earlier and see your screen.
First time I checked the chat.
Well, if no one else has any other questions, thank you for giving a presentation for our webinar today.
My pleasure. I want to encourage all of you to understand how powerful it is. The activity you've got, this opportunity that the AmeriCorps has given you, that the Alliance has given you, is amazing. Some of our AmeriCorps partners have gone on to be PhD students. One of them became a firefighter. I'd have to say, after watching us do the work that takes 3 to 4 years to get something done, sometimes 10, 15, it took us about 15 years to get the Sierra Conservancy. She was like, forget it. I'm running into burning buildings and carrying people out on my back. I'm like, okay. So I really want to thank again Sierra Nevada Alliance for giving me this opportunity to meet you.
Thank you for giving a presentation today.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Izzy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody, good to see you there, Rachel.